Okay, so following up from the previous video, if you watched the last video on making the shopping cart example, you've pretty much ended up with something like this, where if you run it, it tallies up all the items you've added to the cart. It tells you how much of each item and then the total price. We're going to take this and make it into a much more full application, something that you can actually have a bit of a user interface for, that you're not having to run through a command line, something a little bit more user-friendly and more like an actual program. So based on this, we're going to be making a more complicated version of this. So we're going to be starting from scratch pretty much. We're going to be going to a full new file. You can just create a new file called shopping cart _002.py, empty file, and we're going to code it from scratch. Now the only thing that we're also going to have to do is download PySide or PyQT, just so we can make that interface. Now there's many interfaces you can use in Python. You can use tkinter, you can also use Qt. I prefer Qt. It has really good interfaces that you can make with it really easily. A lot of documentation, a lot of tutorials on it, so it makes it so much easier. So what we're going to be using is using Qt, or actually more specifically PySide 2. So you're going to have to install that module. Now before we install that, we're also going to need a software to create our interface. Now you can create interfaces directly through Python, through code. It's a lot more work, so much easier just downloading Qt Designer. So there's two types of Qt designers you can get. You can go to the official website and get Qt Designer from the Qt website, and it's like a full-fledged designer. You could do major interfaces in it and everything. There's this really chopped down, simplistic version that I like to use because I'm not building any big enterprise software. I'm just making quick applications fast, just kind of prototyping things extremely fast. So this site here, I'll include the URL inside of this description for the YouTube video. But this person here created this page. I think there's like a bit of some sort of write-up on this person at the bottom of the page, but they made this they have this kind of more simplified version of Qt Designer. It's like 31 megabytes, so fast to install and use. So I'm going to be using this because it's just quick, lightweight, and we can get directly to what we're needing to do, which is create a bit of a user interface. But really, whether you're using another Qt Designer, they're all the same. It's all going to be the same thing. But this is what I'll be using. And then we're also going to have to install PySide 2. Now you can use PyQT 5 or PySide 2, either one. So you're going to have to install those and download those modules. So if I look at my command prompt here, you could do something like pip. If you have pip for installing packages on Python, you could just do pip install PyQt 5 or PyQt, or just PySide 2, which is what I'm going to be using. And PySide 2 is pretty much the same as PyQt. The difference is licenses. So this site has a good explanation. This Martin Fitzpatrick has a great explanation of the differences between these licensing platforms for PyQt and PySide 2. To sum it up, I think it sums it up pretty well here, is if you're planning to release your software itself under the GPL license, so PyQt 5 license, or you're developing the software which will not be distributed, the GPL requirement of PyQt 5 is unlikely to be an issue. However, if you plan to distribute your software without distributing the source, so if you want to give your program to other people and not give them the source code, you're going to have to buy a commercial license for PyQt 5. If you're wanting to do that, distribute your software without distributing the source, then you can use PySide 2. And PySide 2 is kind of like a LGPL license of PyQt. So it's really just different licensing. PyQt 5 is obviously going to be much better for large commercial applications, but PySide 2 is going to do everything we want. So pretty much to summarize it, you can use PyQt, PySide, PyQt 5, doesn't matter, whatever you use. The only difference is if you use PySide, you can distribute your software without the source because it's based on the LGPL license, whereas all the PyQt stuff is based on the GPL or commercial license. So you can look up those license types if you need to know exactly what the differences are. but we'll be using PySide 2, but the syntax and the coding is pretty much identical, so it's not going to change really whether you're using PyQT or PySide. The code is practically the same. There's not much differences, so won't really matter. So if you don't have PySide, you could just go in here and say pip install PySide 2, and it should install. I already have it installed, so it's fine. But yeah, that's pretty much how you can get that package. If you don't have pip, Google on how to install it. You probably want pip to get packages. It's so much easier. You're going to say pip install and then whatever package you want, PyQT, pip install PyQT 5, and there you go, boom, I'm installing PyQT 5. So it's going to make it a lot easier for getting packages for Python. So you want to get pip. If you already have that, great. So you want to install those two things, Qt Designer and PySide 2. If you got that, we're ready to go. So we already have that installed. I already have this this Qt Designer installed, and I have PySide installed, so I'm ready to go. So I can start coding. So what we're going to start off with is pretty much making our application first. It's making a very simple empty application. So I'm going to open up Qt Designer, and it's going to look something like this. And I'm going to create a dialog with buttons. I just click create, and you'll see this window when you open up the software. And it will just create me a window like this, and I'm just going to delete these buttons. I'm just going to have it as a blank window. We'll give the window a name. So right now you see it just says Dialog Untitled. I'll go here. I won't change this name. This is the object name, the name of this actual object. What you actually want to do is change the text. So I can search text, or I can search title, window title, not dialog. I'll call it shopping cart. That's it. And that's all we're going to do for now. And I'm going to save this, so file save as. I'll save it to folder on my computer called cart.ui. It saves these .ui files. And you want to put that UI file in the same folder that you're going to have your Python code in. So I'm saving it to my D drive under my Python folder. Same location that my Python file is going to go under, because I'll have to be able to find that file. Our software or our code will have to be able to find that UI file. So just make sure that UI file and your Python file that you're running is both in the same folder. And in this case, I have it in my D drive in the Python folder, py folder. So we're going to start coding, and all we want to do is just make that window pretty much appear that we just saw, that Qt Designer window, this. I want that to appear when I run my software, and that's it. And that's the first thing we're going to aim to do. First, just make that interface appear. So to make that happen, we're going to have to add a bunch of code. This part will be tedious. You could probably save the code and reuse it, but I'm going to go back to my Visual Studio Code, and I start typing it. So first thing we need, or probably that we'll need, is import sys, import system stuff, import OS. Probably need those two at some point. And then I'm going to have to also import my PySide stuff, so I could run that PySide 2 or Qt interface. If you're using Qt instead of PySide, you're going to do something like, from Qt 5 or whatever, but in this case, I'm doing PySide, so I'll be from PySide 2, import, and I want to import the Qt GUI, Qt widgets. So if I use any widgets or anything, I'll have the references for those. Qt core. So I'll need something like that. I'll also probably have to do from PySide 2, PySide 2 dot Qt core. So from core import all, or import kind of wildcard star, import everything, and then from PySide to Qt widgets. So from the widgets, import everything from PySide to Qt UI tools, import QUI loader, because we're gonna have to load that interface file, which will allow that built interface that we made and saved as a .ui file to be opened up. So that's all I'll need so far. Then what I'll have to do is create a class. So we're going to be creating, an application here, not just a command line console program, but actual applications. I'm going to add a class called form and make it a queue object. So you always need to do this with any sort of application. This code is pretty much going to be reusable. You can reuse it for if you make another application. This stuff really never changes, really, unless you have to, but most cases you won't have to. So I'm just going to do parent equals none, and that's pretty much it. And then super form self dot init. So this will pretty much just initialize itself, and that should be pretty much it. So now we just have to load the UI. So we're going to say load UI file. So we're going to do something like UI file equals Q file UI file, and then we're going to say UI file dot open Q file dot read only. Loader equals Q UI loader, so we're initializing that QI loader, kind of creating it itself. Dot window equals loader. Oops. Loader dot load UI file. Okay, so I think this should be good, and then I have to close the file after I read it. So close. So what we're saying is we're going to say, okay, we're going to read a UI file. We're going to initialize the loader, load that UI file, and then close it after. So we have to do this, and then to show the window, we have to say self dot window show. Otherwise, the window won't actually show. So we have to do that. And now this is just like a class. So this is the form. It's initializing like a form queue object. Our function, our function is initialize. So for our initialize function, we're pretty much just setting everything up, setting the window up, loading the UI file, showing the window. That's going to start when it initializes, and then finally, we need to run this function, this initialize function. So what we have to do is then for our program, or kind of like the main instance, the running section of our program down here, we have to do something like this. If name equals main, like that. App equals queue application system argv, and then we could give it like a style. If we have like different styles, different looks we want to apply, we can assign a style. I don't think we'll need to do that right now, but I'm just going to do a comment here, load UI. This is where UI actually gets loaded. So this is where we make our class for our object and define the function, the initialize function, which loads the UI file and shows the window. This is where the program actually starts, and then it creates the application. We load the UI, so form equals form. So now we're referring to this class. And we're going to throw in that UI file, so cart.ui, and then at the end it's going to say system exit. There we go, and that should be it. So it's going to load that UI file, and it's just at the very end when it closes or when it's done. I'm going to execute that. And then if it's not executing, it'll close. So that's pretty much it. So if we run this, there we go. We got that shopping cart window, which has nothing in there. So this is the bare bones for making a UI program. Maybe you could cut some things out, but this is kind of how I like to do it. I just reuse this code a lot. It gives me a good bare bones setup for if I need to make a UI application. You can save this. There's nothing here. It's really just initializing, creating that window from that UI file, and that's it. Displaying it, and that's it. And if you close it, it closes. So that's all we have here. 30 lines of code. pretty much nothing out of the ordinary. It's just the bare bones for running a UI application. This is it. Now everything that comes after this will be actually making our program again. So this is all we need right now. But we're going to have to go and add a lot more to this and pretty much recreate a program that we created last time, but now with the challenges of having this UI. So again, initialize function. This runs the full software. All this initialization is in a class, which is like a group of different functions that you can have, and it's called form, or our actual UI or object, which is kind of like our window. And then here is this running that program, or creating instances of that program and loading that UI. This is where the program actually gets executed. This is really just the class, or the actual form class, and then all of its functions that go with it. So this is kind of our bare bones. So next we need to start making our shopping cart all over again. First through that UI, and then connecting that UI to our code. So now we're going to start building our interface in a bit more detail. So we're going to go back to the Qt designer, and we're going to make a better interface here. So we can size this window, scale it, do whatever. Just make it something reasonably sized like this. We're going to make a UI that stretches with the window. So we're going to add a bit of a layout type thing in here. So what we can do is, like, if we add something in here, for example, we're going to do a vertical layout. That'll make it easier for us to space everything out. And when we drag that in, it gives us like this group, but it's not bound to the window. So what you can do, the trick is to make everything automatically resizable, is just add that vertical layout in here. Right click on some empty space here and say layout in a grid, and it will snap that vertical layout to match this window. So now when I scale the window, that vertical layout grid is scaling with it and automatically adjusting. Now we're going to put stuff inside this vertical layout. Vertical layout is going to help everything stack. So our UI is going to be really, really simple. We're going to take a combo box, so a box with a drop down, that's going to have all of our items we can add to our shopping cart. So I'm going to go here and look for my combo box, or drop down. There it is, combo box. So I'll take it and drag it in here. There's our combo box. That's going to have all the items in the drop down that we can add. Then we'll have a button that will allow us to add those items. So I'll drag this push button in here, and I'll throw it at the bottom where you see this blue line, and that's saying throw it underneath this combo box. So now we have this push button. And then I'm going to add a list view. This list will be our shopping cart underneath the add button that we're going to create. So again, I'll drag this list view, put it so I see this blue line, make sure it's inside that red square rectangle, so it puts it underneath. And now you can see the UI coming together. We got our drop down box, our button that will add the items from the drop down to the cart, and then we're going to put a label. So I'm going to look for label underneath this list view, and that will be our summary of items in our cart. And then I'll add another label, and that will be our total price. So now we can set the sizing a little bit better, because if you see, if I drag the window and size it, see everything's sizing? That's great. It's all resizable. But we want to set some limits to things. For example, combo box, we want a minimum height for it, so it doesn't end up too small. So I'm going to click on that combo box, and you can see a bit of a hierarchy of all our items here. Vertical layout, inside the vertical layout is our combo box. Then our, well, it's maybe not in order, but we have combo box, our push button, our list view, and our labels. We need to give these proper names because these names are not good right now, but we'll do that after we set their sizing. So for a combo box, let's click on it. Let's go here to our property editor. Let's look for minimum size height. Make the minimum size height maybe to 21. Let's go to our push button. Minimum size height to also 21. our labels, minimum size height, also to 21 for both of them. That way they just aren't too small. You want to have them a proper size. So there we go. Now we have this. We're going to start giving these proper names, but before we do that, let's save this. Let's go back to our Visual Studio Code and run it just to make sure it all works. And there it is. There's our interface. We have our drop-down box, a push button that will add the items that we select in our drop-down box into the cart here. This text label will give us a summary. This text label will give us our total price. And you can see if I scale the window, everything resizes nicely. So now, next thing, go back to our Qt designer. Give things proper names. So combo box. Its class or type is QComboBox. Its name right now that we'd refer to in coding is called ComboBox. I don't like that name. So object name, we're going to change it to CMB for combo. And we're going to call it something like item list. So our cart item list. The label at the bottom here, which will give us our summary of our items, we're going to call it LBL for label. And I'll call it summary. The next label for our total price, we'll call it LBL for label again. Total, maybe just LBL total. That makes it simple. Now we don't want the default text to be like text label. So on here where it says text label for our LBL summary, in the property editor, I'll just filter it by text and set that to nothing. And then for LBL total, I'll again search it for text and set maybe the text is 0.00, which will be like our default price, nothing. Just so we have some default initial values in there. Our list view, our view that's going to have our full cart. I don't want to call it list view. I'm going to call it LST for list. And I'll call it LST or maybe LST view, list view, cart. And then push button, this one here, for adding the items that we select in our combo box to the cart. We'll call that BTN for button, add. So now here's our renamed stuff, which makes more sense. BTN add. BTN because it's a button. CMB item list. CMB because it's a combo box. LBL summary, LBL total, LBL because it's a label. It just makes it so much easier to know what you're referring to when you name it like that. And then list view cart, LST for list view, and then it's our cart. So I'll save this. So now we have all those names nicely named. So it'll be so much easier to code. So now in our code, we have to initialize all these items. So back in here in our Visual Studio Code, we're going to have to start making all these widgets kind of get initialized. Because right now it loads a UI file, but we don't really initialize any of those controls. So we have to kind of initialize them. So what we're going to do is initialize them. And we're going to start off with populating that list first. So that drop-down list, we're going to start populating that. So if I want to add stuff to that list, I have to initialize that list first. That combo box, not list. The combo box. I have to initialize the combo box. So I'm going to call it, what do we call it over here in our Qt Designer? We called it CMB item list. So in our code, I'm going to say CMB item list equals self dot window. So it's going to look through that window for find child. So it's going to find an item within that window. And then we have to define the type, and it's a combo box. So it's going to be Q combo box. And then its name. And it has to be exactly the name. So just to be sure, our name is CMB item list. So I'm going to do CMB item list. And just double check to make sure that's exactly the same. That's it. So now we initialize, we'll say here, initialize UI components. Or it is UI. UI buttons, etc. UI stuff. Sure. So that's where we initialize it. Now we'll have to add items to that list. So we're going to say CMB item list. Now we can add, so dot add item. And we can make a list of items. So we'll do something like apple, CMB item list, add item. And we could do this not as manual as we're doing it now, but we'll do that in maybe a later video. So we'll just add a bunch of items. So I'm just going to take this apple, orange, what else we got? Strawberries, blueberries, watermelon. What else do we got? Banana, avocado. Sure, that's going to be our list of items that we can buy. So now that we have that, if we run this drop-down list should have all those items. Okay? So now what we want to do, our goal now is to be able to pick one of these and click add or the push button, and it will add it to our cart and total up the price. So we should probably go rename that button. So I'll go back to Qt Designer. Push button, we don't want to call it push button. Let's see the text for this. We'll call it add to cart. That's going to be what the button's called. So when you have the item selected, you could click add to cart and add it to your cart. So we have to make it possible to add items to the cart. So how can you do a click event? If I click on this button, I want it to trigger an action. So to do that, again, I have to initialize that button. So let's do that. btn, and what's it called? btn add. Okay, so btn add equals self.window.findChild q button, or it's going to be actually q push button, and then the name is btn add. So we initialized it. Now we can use it. So how do I connect an event to that button? Well, what I can do, let's make a comment here. Make clickable event on button. So to do that, we will do btn add dot clicked dot connect. So we're connecting it. When you click on it, it'll connect to a function. That function will be self dot, we'll make it update items or update cart. So now we have to make a function called update cart that will trigger when we click this button. So we have to go outside of this initialize. We're no longer initializing. This is going to be a separate function. We're going to define that function. So def makes our function. The function is going to be called update items or update cart, whatever we want to call it. So I'm going to do update cart, and then you have to make sure referring to itself, which is the form. And that's it. So update cart self, and then we can tell it to do something here. So in this case, if we wanted it to add that item, whatever item we have selected, to the cart, well, that gets a little bit tricky. How are we going to do that really? What we have to do is get the text from that combo box and add that text to our list or our list view. So to do that, what I'm going to have to do is again initialize that list view and then add that item to the list. So to do that, what I'm pretty much going to have to do is initialize that list. So I'm going to have to go in here, and similar to what we did up here, initializing the UI stuff, we're going to have to do it with the list view. So let's do that. Let's take a look at how we can do that. And we'll change this around, but let's just start that first. Let's get that accomplished. So it's going to be list view cart, and it's type QList view. So LST view cart. Let's go here. LST view cart equals self window find child type is QListView. Now, one thing we won't want to do here is we don't want it to be a QListView. We actually want it to be a QListWidget. It's a little bit different in how you can do things with it, but right now it's a QListView. We actually want it to be a QListWidget, and we can change that by right-clicking on here and say, morph into QTableWidget, QTreeView, different types of UI elements. And we're going to morph it into a QListWidget. And if we do that, you'll see this change to QListWidget, and that's what we want. And we'll save that. It'll just make it easier to add items to it. So we'll do that. So it won't be QListView, it'll be QListWidget. That's its new type. QListWidget. And its name. So LSTViewCart. And that's it. Now I've initialized it. So now we can add things to it. Now we want to add it with this click event. So we're going to also have to get the text from our combo box. And since this is in a new function, it won't have access to the stuff we've done up here for initializing. So we'll have to initialize it again. So I'm going to initialize the combo box again. So I could just copy and paste this. There we go. Initialize them both, and I can access them both. So what we're going to do now is say self. And actually, we don't even need to do self. Let's do list view cart.add item. So we're going to add an item to our list view. That item will be our combo item list, or combo box item list. And it will be the text of what we have currently selected. So it will be combo item list dot text, and that will get the current text. Now the only thing we have to be a little bit careful of here when we do this is that it's the correct type. If it's like a number or something, we might have to do a conversion to string so it knows it's text and not something else, but this should work. So we'll give this a try. So what we can do now is pretty much run this and we should be okay. But actually, I don't believe it should be text. I don't think that'll be right. Let's see. Yeah, it gives me an error. No attribute called text. So it's actually current, because the text can change on the combo box. So it's actually current text, like this. There we go. And that should get the current text. So if we clear this, let's run that again. Okay, apple, add to cart, apple. Now if we switch this up, banana, there we go. So now it can add these items to our list when we click add to cart. So it's having our list of all our items here. So that's all working. I added a bunch of blueberries, there they all are. So now we have that all working. Now we're going to make this a little bit better. So update cart should really only update our items. Adding to the cart should be a separate function. Or at least I think that'll make it a little bit easier. So I'm going to make another function called def, or not def, but this function, add items, or add item. And it will refer to self, and then we'll give it an item name. And that will pretty much be it. And what this will do, the point of this function will be to add the current item in combo box to list and view the item in list. So we're going to add it to a list and add it into our viewed list. Maybe we can word this a bit better. Add the current item in combo box to a list and to our list view. So I'm just going to do that. So update cart will update the cart. The add item will actually do the work of adding the items. So we're going to pretty much do the same thing we did. Take these two here, paste them in here instead. So that's where we'll define our combo box and our list view. And what we're going to do is do the exact same thing. Add the current text selected in our combo box to our list view. But we're also going to make a variable that will keep track of the items in the background. So we're going to create a variable at the very top here, floating at the top, so it's like a global, it's accessible by everything, and we'll call it cart items and make it a list. So those two kind of square brackets make it a list, cart items, and then we'll have to add it in here. So in order to add it in here, what I will do is say cart items, and we'll append or add that item as well. So I can do something like cart items append item name, and the item name will come from the function here, and that function will be used in our update cart, which will actually do the updating of the cart. So for all this to work now, our update cart will kind of do the heavy lifting for updating the cart. Our add item will actually deal with adding it to the list and adding it to our list in the background and our list in our UI view. So update cart, we can remove all this now. No more. Add item is going to do all that heavy lifting. In our update cart, all we're going to do is tell it to add the item that we currently have. So, it's just going to be pressing that button. So we'll say add button, click. So when you do the button click, it's doing this self add item. We'll use that other function here, and then we'll just feed it the combo box. We'll have to get the combo box again, initialize it here. Actually, I should reorder some of this so we know what the comments are meaning. So running the add item function, we're going to add the item, combo item list, current text. That's it. All we need to do. Simple as that. And that should all work. So if I save this and run this, it's not going to change anything. Oh, I got an error. Some indentation errors. Let's see. If I had like an extra tab or an extra indent somewhere. Let's see. Here it is. So I got extra space there. It's giving me the error. There we go. So if we run this now, okay, apple, 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 strawberries, strawberries, and it's giving me an error. Item name is not defined. That's because I'm saying, item name here. Item name. Don't have the caps there. My bad. There we go. Item name, item name. So now it should work. Add item, and we're putting the text in here. That text is going to go here, which will be fed into our list of our cart items. So it's really just adding whatever we have selected in this list to the view, right? The view, or list view cart, the view, and then also to our list up here. Now you don't have to do that. We're just doing that to make it simple. I'm trying to kind of program this in a way where everyone can kind of understand what's going on from like a more simpler kind of way of looking at it. There's much better ways and more optimized ways to do this, much more optimized, but I'm just kind of building this up over time so you can kind of see the thought process working. So this is going to keep track of everything in the background, whereas our list view is just adding it as we add it. So now we got everything working, but we have the whole problem of like, how do we get all that other functionality back? That other functionality of having it total our prices. Where are prices even defined? We don't even have our prices defined anymore. Before we had our prices in here, we don't even have that anymore. And before we're able to get a nice summary using this, we don't even have that anymore. So maybe let's take this cart summary and get that working again. So we all know we have that, that LBL summary that sits right here. That's supposed to give us a summary of what's in our cart. So let's add that in next. So I'll take the code from our previous example here, and I'll make that work now in our UI application. So to make that work in our UI application, it's going to go in our update cart. Whenever that button gets clicked, it updates, and it should update that summary. So I want to set that cart summary and get that all working. So let's go in here and paste that in. Cart summary. So we're going to say update cart summary. So same as before, we have to change this a little bit. Instead of looking through cart items, that stays the same. So it's going to look through that list of items, total everything up. So this code remains pretty much 100% the same, because in the background we have that list with all our items. So we can leave that all the same. And it's going to tally everything up. All we need to do is set that label text. So we're going to set our label text. Now before we can do that, we have to initialize our label. So our label is going to be, let's check its name again, LBL summary, and it's a Q label. So I'll go in here and say LBL summary equals self.window.findChild Q label LBL summary. There we go, initialized. Now we'll use that. So LBL summary, summary, and we'll set the text of it. Set text to string. Make sure we convert our text to a string. Cart summary, and that should be it. That should do it. And we'll save that and run it. So apple. See how telling the apples? Now if we had an orange, banana, and avocado. There we go. So we have all the individual items here. Here's our summary of everything with its number or quantity. Now we have to get the pricing. So here we go. Applications coming together. We're at almost 70 lines of code. Not anything too crazy right now. Just to make it really simple, we add all our items to our list here that are available to add. We have our click event when we click on our button for adding things to cart. When we click on that, it triggers the event called update cart, or the function. That update cart function runs the add item function, which adds the current item selected in the combo box, or the current text in the combo box, to our list view and to a background list that's kind of just floating here as a global variable. And yeah, it's pretty much just doing that. And then our cart summary is just taking that same list, cart items, that global list, and looping through it and seeing how many instances of each item occurs, and then outputting that as our summary. So that's like our dictionary that's doing all that tallying that we kind of did in our last example. So pricing we need to add now to our UI application. How are we going to add pricing? What's a good way to add pricing, or a simple way to add pricing? Well, a good way to add pricing is not to add it every time. It can just be mistakes. Like if we want to update the prices, it sucks to have to go in here and change each one of these or do something like that. We're going to learn something new. We're going to learn something that's kind of like a little bit different. It's going to be like a dictionary, but we're going to be able to look up prices. So what we're going to do is we're going to create under our update items, or update cart, here, where it updates the whole shopping cart. We're going to pretty much add something in here to loop through our cart items, or go through our cart items, look through it, and figure out all the pricing, or add all the pricing. But before we do that, we have to kind of make a list of that pricing. So we're going to make a new function at the top here, kind of like a global again. Maybe not the best way of doing things. Oops, I'm just going to clear this, because I think there we go. Let's just run this, make sure everything's good. Oh, do I have an error? What's going on here? Let me just save this, run it. I think I messed something up here. So to make sure this all works. think I am in. There we go. Went to some terminal view there for a second. Okay, this is all good. Apple, 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 watermelon, it's all working. So we're gonna go up here and we're gonna add, let's clear this. We're gonna add item prices. Item prices equal. We're gonna make like a dictionary type thing with all these different items. So apple, okay, we're gonna define the price of an apple. So it's gonna be 50 cents. Then we'll define the price of orange. Orange price will be 65 cents. Then we're going to define the price of our next item, so strawberries. Want to make sure that all the text matches. You don't want to have spelling mistakes or anything. Strawberries will be maybe $5. Then we'll do blueberries. Blueberries, they'll be $6. And then watermelon, that price is going to be $5.50. And then we'll do banana. Banana, that price is going to be $1. And then avocado is going to be the most expensive. Let's make it something ridiculous. Or we'll make it kind of realistic, maybe $2. There we go. So there's all our item prices that we defined. We could fetch these from like a web page or something in like a future video, but for now let's put them here in like a kind of like a, we're going to do a dictionary lookup type thing. So it's going to be up here, like a list like this with all the item prices defined. So let's save this, run it, make sure it works. Good. So now what we're going to do is under update cart, we are going to pretty much look through the items in our cart, check with this list, and add the prices all together. So that's where it gets a little bit more interesting. How are we going to do that? So in here, we're going to add something new. We're going to go in here and we're going to pretty much loop through all the items, fetch the prices, and add those to a total. Now that total we're going to have to make, so I'll make a new variable up here for cart total. Make it 0 for now, it doesn't matter. That's going to be our new global variable, cart total. If we have to access that variable in a function, sometimes it's safer. You might get errors. You might have to do one of these type things where you say global cart items, or whatever item is not cart items. What is it? Cart items? Yeah, cart items and cart total. So this way it signifies as like a global variable. It'll be able to go outside the function and get values from it and update values to it. So that's just kind of something we're just going to be careful of. If you get errors, you usually have to make sure defined as a global. Globals aren't good. You don't want to define a ton of globals, but we're just doing that because it'll make it easy to understand and keep track of. So we're doing all three of these because we want to access all the info from all three of these within this function. So I'm defining all those variables as global so I can access them and update them outside of this function by doing things in this function. So we got those defined as globals. So what we need to do now is we need to loop through all our items in our cart. So when we add items, it adds it to our list view, as you can see here, but it also adds it to that cart items list. So we're going to loop that cart items list. So to do that, make a new comment here. We'll say loop through all items in cart, fetch prices, and add to total. So what we're going to do is say something like for item in cart items. That's that variable. So for every item inside this cart item, we're going to go through each item in there, and we're going to say we'll do something like total price equals, so we'll make a new variable called total price. Total price equals something like item prices. So we have to go look up these item prices. Dot get, so we're going to get our item. We're going to get the price from our item prices, so item prices.get, and we have to feed it something to get the price of. Like, what name do we want to get the price of? So that name will be our item, and we can just do something like that. So if this makes sense, we're looping through all items in our cart items. So our cart item stores a name of every object that we have in there: the apple, the orange, the strawberry, whatever. So when it loops through that, it goes through our cart and it says, oh, the first item is a strawberry, let's say. Well, then the total price will go to the item price list here. It will get the item, so the item is a strawberry, as I just said. So it's going to get the strawberry, and it's going to get that price, $5. And it will add that to our total price, or make that our total price variable. So total price for that item. And then what we'll do, actually maybe not total price, that's maybe a bad thing, we'll say item price. And what we'll then do, or maybe, yeah, item price. It's kind of weird because we have item prices and item price, but that's okay. Not good, but you could change it to whatever makes sense for you. And what we'll do now is get the cart total and add that current item price to the total. So we'll say cart total plus equals, so you're adding item price. You're adding that item price to the cart total. And then what we'll do is we'll output the total price of our cart to that other label. So that bottom label here is LBL total. So again, we have to go back here and initialize it if it's not. So we'll initialize LBL total. So LBL total equals self dot window find child q label LBL total. So now it's initialized. Then what we'll do is we'll set the text of it. So LBL total set text, make it a string, and make it cart total. And then we'll set cart total to 0 because it's tallying up all the items in the full cart. And after it does that, we want to set the cart total variable to 0, so next time when we add an item, it's not adding on all those prices again. It's counting everything up in the cart from 0, so we get the correct number. And then we can shuffle this around a bit to make more sense, like updating the cart summary can come before updating the price total. And that pretty much should do it. So if we run this, we get our shopping cart: apple, 1 apple, 50 cents, 2 apples, $1, add an avocado, add a banana, a watermelon. It all seems to work. And it's fully resizable. So there we go. So now we have our kind of shopping cart program working. So nothing crazy, but now you kind of know how to make a UI, set up a similar program to what we did in the last lesson, but now with a proper UI, a little bit more complex, breaking things into functions and having a full working program made in Python. So that's pretty much it. So yeah, it's pretty much a bit of an application made with Python and Qt or PySide, and this is kind of how you can start making your own programs with user interfaces that are a little bit more user friendly.